stay with me unless you wish to leave. If you need to leave at any moment in these next 20 minutes, please feel free to leave. Because that's our theme here. Freedom. You gotta go, you gotta go. Leave. Don't hurt my feelings. Okay?
Freedom!
Freedom! Yay! Let's go. So this is the bell tower. Take a moment to take some photos because we're not coming back this way. Because when he signed the Declaration, he signed largely. Now, in his mind, he's a man of action. Yeah. In his mind, that's what we're going to celebrate. But what happens is that it's the Declaration that every generation comes back to. And Mr. Jefferson had drafted that Declaration. And you can get your own copy. This is mine. I downloaded it from the Library of Congress. Mr. Jefferson's draft of the Declaration. You can actually see his brain working. He writes something, scratches it out. And then after he wrote it in June of 1776, he turned to two other members of the committee, Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. Will the doctor, with his expanded view on the topic, peruse this and make any changes you see fit? We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable that all men are created equal. Dr. Franklin scratched out sacred and undeniable and wrote above it self-evident. But now, July 3rd and 4th, when the Continental Congress came back, now that we voted for independence, now they turn their attention to this. And half the men in this room were attorneys at law. And what do lawyers do to other lawyers' legal documents? They tear them apart. And you're not even one of the self-described lawyers, are you, sir? How do you know this thing about these attorneys? So, yes, for 2 days, Thomas Jefferson sat in this room while the Continental Congress cut out 25% of his draft and made 80 changes to his words. And he sat here both days and never once did he complain out loud. Now, do you think you could have done that? Could our attorneys done that if they had written this document? I see a shake of the head. Later, he complained that my declaration was mangled. In fact, he made sure that he'd make copies of his original version and sent it to his friends and said, "This is what I wrote." And that copy is next door in the American Philosophical Society's collection. Now, on July 4th, after they adopted changes, John Dunlap's printing office received a manuscript which no longer exists to our knowledge, and he sent it to type, and this is how the people found out. And it goes out on the 5th of July. George Washington is in command of the Continental Army in New England, and he has read to his soldiers on the 9th of July. Now, on August 2nd, though, the handwritten copy was brought to the room on August 2nd, and if you had voted in your delegation, you were supposed to put your name on that one and only copy. 56 men did. One of those was Benjamin Rush of Pennsylvania, and he wrote a letter a couple of decades later to John Adams. He said, "Do you recall the day that we signed the Declaration? How the room was silent and solemn, for many of us felt we were signing our very own death warrants." In the end, it became our birth certificate. Every generation comes back to it. That's why Dr. King will say in 1963, "I have a dream." And in that speech he said the Declaration was a promissory note that all Americans. That's why Abraham Lincoln stood in this very room in 1861 on George Washington's birthday and said, "The Declaration was more than our gaining our independence. The principles of liberty," he said, what he felt, would in time inspire men around the world. Now, we fight 8 years of war with the assistance of the French, the Spanish, and the Dutch, and under the generalship of George Washington. At the end of the war, the general goes home. He does not become a king, as some will suggest. But under the Articles of Confederation, these 13 states are not friendly. And the British say that we Americans are a contentious, quarrelsome, disagreeable people. Why would they say such a thing after 8 years of war? They say we will turn on each other. And when we do, they will just return and reclaim their plantations. 12 of the states come back to revise the Articles of Confederation, sending delegates. Virginia sent many, but the most important one was George Washington. He's asked to sit in that very chair. It is the only thing original in this room. That chair. And he presided over the meetings, and over 4 months, these delegates would write this. 4 pages, the United States Constitution. And this is the actual size of it. The real one is in the National Archives. Its purpose is plainly in the preamble: to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty. Not one of those founders was happy with it, because not everyone got whatever they wanted. George Washington will say in a letter, "A miracle has occurred in Philadelphia." James Madison will write to Thomas Jefferson in France, "A miracle has occurred in Philadelphia." They compromised over slavery, and it took a civil war to end slavery. When Dr. Franklin suggested that everyone should have the right to vote in the Republic, they will compromise and let the states decide who gets to vote. 4 of the amendments to the United States Constitution deals with the right to vote. And George Mason of Virginia stepped on the other side of the bar and refused to sign the Constitution because it had no Bill of Rights. 5 of the first 10 amendments talk about those rights we just talked about across the hall. The right to a trial by jury, the right to the counsel of an attorney, the right to not be a witness against yourself, etc. So the Declaration is a promise, but it is the Constitution that is the fulfillment of it. Now my last story is the chair. On the 100th anniversary of our founding, they brought this chair back, but they forgot the British had destroyed all the furnishings in here in 1777 when they occupied the city. So this chair is built after the British occupation. They put a sign on it. They said it's John Hancock's chair. It wasn't built till 1779. So no, it is not John Hancock's chair. So we, the National Park Service, said we need to break this myth. So how do you break a myth? Should we consult our attorneys? We find another story that sounds better. With some truth to it. James Madison was eavesdropping on Dr. Franklin on September 17, 1787. He heard the doctor say as they were signing the Constitution, they'd often been looking at the carving of the sun on top of the chair for 4 months, unable to determine whether it was going to be a rising or setting one. At last, I have the happiness to know it is a rising, not a setting sun. Constitution is the new day. So we call it the Rising Sun Chair. What do you think? Better than John Hancock's chair? But after Dr. Franklin left, he was stopped in the street by Elizabeth Powell. She, like Abigail Adams, always liked her dish of politics and wanted to be the first in on the story. Doctor, what do we got? Will we have a republic or will we have a monarchy? He said, we have given you a republic if you can keep it. So now who is you? It's ours. Because now we are the people of the United States. Welcome to the experience.